What is happening, everybody? So, I haven't talked on this subject in a while, and I figured it was due for a refresh. These are bullet points on what to do with your vehicle before you take it to the dyno. And for a novice into the hobby, this will kind of give you a bit of a checklist. And for some of our more experienced guys out there, if nothing else, it'll give us something to chat about. So, at any rate, first and foremost, consumable parts. Things like belts, hoses, fuel filters. Make sure all of those are in tip-top working order. The last thing you want is for a hose to fail or a belt to fray and wrap itself around a hose, causing it to fail, creating one hell of a mess. Don't be that guy. Make sure that your consumable parts are in tip-top shape. If you do have a vehicle with a serviceable fuel filter, make sure that your fuel filter is at least in proper working order. In other words, it's not 5 or 6 years old. As a part of general maintenance, that should be something that you're changing about once every 7 to 8 months to every year, depending on the amount of miles that you're putting on your vehicle, conditions and all that, fuel quality. But make sure that it is something that you're at least thinking about. If you haven't swapped it out in a long time, go ahead and swap that thing out before you take it to the dyno. Again, if your vehicle does have a serviceable fuel filter. Also, speaking of fluids, change your oil before you take your car to the dyno. Look, I know it's a bit of a hassle and it does make you incur a bit of an expense, but it solves two problems. One, you'll make sure that it is fresh oil that you're going to be running, because keep in mind, your car is going to be run at maximum load and maximum RPM for at least 2 to 3 pulls. Make sure that the thing is at least lubricated properly. But what it also does is it puts you in a position where you know that you will not be dealing with an oil starvation problem on the dyno. Yeah, look, I know your car's a cream puff, but there are some cars out there that burn a little bit of oil, and if you're not checking it on a regular basis and you're stretching out those oil change intervals, which you shouldn't be doing, you could end up in a situation where you may be quite low on oil. Problem with that is if the car is sitting at a slight angle on the dyno, well, you could potentially run into an oiling issue. Not something that you want to run into on the dyno or in any case. So change your oil before you go to the dyno. Another thing you need to think about is make sure that you fill your tank up full of fuel. Again, because your car is probably going to be sitting on a slight incline, typically nose down if it's rear-wheel drive, that is going to mean that the fuel is going to be moved away from the pickup. Because of that, you can run into a fuel starvation problem if you're not running with a full tank of fuel. So, word to the wise, fill the thing up full of fuel before you take it to the dyno. And if you have a car that's been sitting for any real length of time, say 3, 4, 5 months, make sure you burn all that old fuel off before you bring it to the dyno. Fill it up with fresh gasoline, and if it has been that long, burn a couple of tanks through the car before you bring it to the dyno. The last thing you want to run into is a fuel quality issue when you're running that thing at wide open throttle. And another thing to consider is your tires. Don't bring a car to the dyno with an old, rotten set of tires. It's something that a lot of dyno operators may not even notice or could overlook, and as Murphy's Law would have it, that tire is going to fail at wide open throttle at about 6,000 RPM at the top of the pull, and it can lead to catastrophic results, ripping parts of your car apart, as well as sending tire treads and shrapnel all around the dyno cell. Not any fun for anybody. So, make sure your tires are in good shape. And last but not least, and I guess this is more of a pet peeve of mine, make sure your car is clean when you bring it to the dyno. The last thing anybody wants when they're hooking your car up and strapping it down is to be getting dirt and debris and some kind of road funk in their face. And they also don't want to have to clean up whatever mess your car made rolling that thing off. And that's really the basis of this, is making sure that you leave it better for the guy behind you. So, at any rate, post up your comments, let me know what you think. And that's a wrap on this one. Y'all have a great one. Adios.